remember thinking, you're drowning, you're dying, this is it, this is the end. And I'm underwater, and at that point, everything stopped, and a voice was saying, they're gonna be okay. And then what I do remember next was being in the boat and not being able to breathe. And we're in the middle of the rainforest. There's no way out of here. It's 28 miles of river is our only exit. I'm a forensic pathologist and a neuropathologist. And, you know, I've conducted thousands of autopsies, investigated thousands of deaths, cut thousands of brains as a neuropathologist and a neuroscientist. I was a professor of anatomy and neurobiology at a big medical school in Boston, and had all the academic checks and won teaching awards and written books. So it was that was the focus of my life at the time, and was work. So that's kind of where I was. Philosophically, I was an atheist, hardcore. You couldn't convince me otherwise. And with my work, just really reinforced that, because I can cut a brain and I can put it out for you, and I'll ask you, where's consciousness? Where's the soul? This doesn't exist. There's no proof for it in this brain. And everything that we think about as that process of consciousness, death, is the dying brain. And it can be very easily explained through hypoxia, the chemical reactions that happen as the brain begins to die, which do happen. But we get into confusing awareness with consciousness, but that's maybe another day. So that's where I was, at the time. It was my wife's 50th birthday, and we had gone to Costa Rica, go on this whitewater rafting trip, and I'm terrified. And I should preface the story a little bit with the idea that I grew up in Maine, or always around lakes and water. I was terrified of water. I hate being around it. I was always terrified I was going to drown. I always found excuses to not be in the water, because I just always felt like I was going to drown. The other thing I used to do, and I never put these pieces together until after this, and this might make sense after the story, I used to get really bored in school, and one of the things I would do is I would hold my breath, watch the second hand on the clock, see how long I could hold my breath, and then try to beat that record. And that's how I spent most of my elementary school. And I always thought, someday I'm going to need this. Someday I'm going to need this. So fast forward 30 years, 40 years down the road, and I'm on this whitewater rafting trip, and it was one of the most technically difficult rivers in the world. And we had our 10-year-old son with us, which I'm thinking, as we're going down this river, this is probably not great parenting, but he had a great time. And we flipped, and I went under. And I didn't panic. I did all the things you're supposed to do, put my feet up and coming through the rapid, and I thought, oh, this is kind of fun. I'm bouncing around these big waves. And then I got pulled under a couple of times. I got caught in a hydraulic, and I couldn't get out. I was stuck at the bottom of the river. And I came down several times, and there was a point, got to the chase of the story, there was a point where I was drowning, and I knew it. And I thought to myself very clearly, I remember thinking, you're drowning, you're dying, this is it, this is the end. And I was thinking, shouldn't I be more upset about this? This is actually very calming. And I thought about the autopsies I'd done on people who had drowned, and I thought, well, this is a lot what you read about in books, that this is supposed to be a very peaceful way to die. And then I remember thinking, well, what the heck is taking so long? And I'm underwater, and at that point, everything stopped. And I was next to this huge boulder, and which was under the water, and all the bubbles had stopped. Everything stopped. And I moved my hand through the bubbles, and they all just sort of moved around my hand in this very kind of weird way. And then there was this bright light. All this is happening simultaneously. I used to think this was very cliche, like a sunset or a sunrise, but those are the only, it wasn't like that. But these are the only words I have in English language to explain something that's outside of normal human experience. I don't have the words for these. At that point, I was able to see everything around me, 360 degrees. And I see it, but more of experiencing it more than seeing it. I knew that my wife had been pulled out. I knew it was a yellow kayak. I knew it was the guy down the river. I knew my son was in the other boat. I knew the boat behind me was coming to get me. I knew that I had a family member that was going through a very difficult personal crisis that I didn't know about, that I knew about, and I knew it was going to be okay. So that was very sort of happening while I'm in this light situation. And there's this incredible overcoming feeling of love. And a voice saying, they're going to be okay. So I get really emotional still, not because it's upsetting, but because I'm in that moment of that beauty. It was just so beyond experience. And I knew my family was going to be okay. And the voice said, they don't need you. You're going to be fine. And that was sort of a moment where I just was like, this is amazing. And just kept repeating, they're going to be okay. They don't need you. You're done. Good job. At that point, the voice in the back of my head was shouting, you're just hypoxic. You're just hypoxic. Hold your breath. You have to beat your record. You have to beat your record. And at that point, the light just sort of vanished. There was a giant sucking sound, and I slammed up against the rock and popped out of the water. When I came up, the boat behind me was almost to me, but I couldn't see anything. I say my vision was like a Viewmaster, one of those old Viewmasters. I could see and it was gone, see and it was gone. I couldn't see motion. And we were through that rapid. And as the water slowed and the boat came up to me, the guide in the boat put the paddle out for me to grab. And I remember reaching up and being, in moments of blackout, thinking, if I don't grab this paddle, I am done. And that's the last thing I remember. And then what I do remember next was being in the boat and not being able to breathe. And we're in the middle of the rainforest. There's no way out of here. It's 28 miles of river is our only exit. And so I immediately slip into this emergency medicine mode, ABCs, airway, breathing, circulation, trying to see if I'm okay. I'm the only doctor for hours, right? And I'm really worried about if I have water in my lungs, because that can cause problems later down the road in the next 24, 48 hours. You can have intense inflammatory reactions in your lungs that can kill you. It's called near drowning. But I felt okay. I didn't feel like I had any water in my lungs. What I realized had happened is I had a laryngeal spasm, and it's something called a dry drowning. So when water irritates your voice box, it closes off, and it's a reflex, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I remember being in the boat, trying to breathe and thinking, that's really great, Cummings. You survived it, you got in the boat, you die in the boat. That's, typical, So knowing that this is a reflex, I'm trying to calm myself down. And I start being able to get little breaths in. And eventually I was able to breathe. We continued down the river like nothing had really happened. And I didn't really think much of it the rest of the day because, I got my son, I got my family. I'm trying not to be freaked out by this. And that night when we got back to where we were staying, I remember looking at my Apple Watch, because I'm a kind of a health freak, and I'm obsessed with my heart rate, sleeping heart rate, resting heart rate. And so I have a constant awareness of my heart rate. And I looked at my Apple Watch, and I had 8 minutes of unrecorded heart rate in that time period. Now, it takes the caveat, it's an electronic device, sure. It also takes the heart rate at intervals. So at least in those 8 minutes, I had a period of time where I had no registered heart rate. It never happened before in that watch. It never happened after that in that watch. It didn't happen the rest of the time. We were on the river. And at that point, I started to think something happened. And we continued with the vacation. The next day, we're going down the river, and I'm a little freaked out by being in the river at this point. And we're paddling down. My son says, "Look at that butterfly on the boat." And I look over, and it's this huge blue butterfly. And I said, "Finn, that's not a butterfly. That's a bird." And he's like, "No, it's a butterfly." And it was so big, and it was a blue morpho. And I didn't know anything about this butterfly until way later, about couple years later. And it followed us the entire 28 miles down the river. Everybody saw it the whole way. The next day, we were rappelling down some waterfalls. And I don't mean beside them, in them, right? This is my wife. This is a survivor vacation. So we're rappelling down 150-foot waterfalls, and there's the blue morpho by my son the whole way. And so we called it angiogram because my mom died a number of years ago. But so that was really profound. I didn't know about that until coming back, which is kind of where I would jump to the after effects. I was on vacation, didn't really have much on my mind when we came back. And I started to notice I was having a lot of problems with time, judging time, estimating time. And you know how when you're doing something, you get lost in it and you forget how much time you spent. That was every moment of my day. And it wasn't so much a problem on vacation, but when I went back to work, when I had a really heavy lecture schedule, I had labs and places I had to be, trains I had to catch, it became a really big problem. I was late for things. I would forget, I would be on my way to teach a class, and I'd run into somebody in the hall and start talking, and 30 minutes would go by. So as I started to notice these time things happening, I realized that something was different. I became very uncomfortable with my career pursuit. Those things weren't important to me anymore. I've written a couple of very bad novels, horror novels, but I say that I was the best character I ever created because I was this piece of paper, and I couldn't identify with that anymore. Those things weren't important to me. And here I was in this intense Boston, malignant academic environment, and it made me physically ill. I just couldn't be there anymore. Jumping off of that, we ended up moving to Maine, where we're from, living in the woods and having a great life. But the after effects were very difficult, and I didn't have a way to deal with it. I think I had a hypoxic brain injury, and it's called dyschronometria. And I have difficulty. I have many ways to cope with it now. It doesn't affect my life, but that was really the catalyst for me to figure out what happened. That pushed me to do what I say, I'm doing my own death investigation of my own consequences of that action. It led me to an incredible world of research that I had no idea existed. Jeffrey Long's book was so incredible. The thing that was the most important for me in terms of turning the corner, because it was a very intrusive, negative experience that I did not want in my life. It completely derailed everything. I changed my course of my career, my life, my relationships. It's difficult to talk to people about it. It's alienating. When I did try to tell people about it, it was like, oh, that sounds really, really horrible. It's a good thing you're still here. Let's get a beer. It wasn't like I needed you to understand it. I just needed you to hear it because I needed to process it. But the thing that really turned the corner for me was Elaine Stout's paper, 6 Challenges Faced by Near-Death Experiencers. That was probably the most profound thing I've ever read in my life. And every single one of those, yes. 75% of people who experience have a very hard time integrating this into their lives. And I knew nothing about these experiences other than what I'd seen in movies. I thought everybody came back and it was beautiful and you loved God and you quoted scriptures and everybody was happy, and it was the opposite for me. And so I had a really hard time reconciling that. And so the Stout paper really made me feel very good about where I was and trying to, I'm a newbie. It's only 3.5 years or so post my experience. So I'm still trying to figure this all out. And I'm no great expert or pontiff on it. I'm still struggling. But what it really taught me, and I think really having this issue with being able to separate from time allows me to understand that what we do is we put great importance on the past and on the future, and we focus so much on those two things. That's where our importance is, but the value is here, right now. And getting out of those boundaries of time allowed me to put the importance where the value is, and where I am right now, the people I'm with right now. The gift of death is teaching the ability to let go and to be alive. I mean, what's the point of music? The point of music is to listen. What's the point of life? The point of life is to live. And that really helped me come to grips with who I am as a husband, a father, a human, my place on the planet. So that's been incredible. And I think as physicians, we all try to practice this thing called evidence-based medicine, which we need data and proof to treat patients so that they can get the best care possible. And through that, we really pathologize death. We sterilize it. We try to prevent it. We medicalize it, and we shield ourselves from it. Funerals happen very quickly after death. It's very fast. No one sees the body, and you go very quickly back into life. We're not experiencing death. We've made it so sterile and kept it behind this curtain that we don't get a chance to really experience and celebrate the transformation that is happening. And I think as physicians, it's not our, I think back to all the times as a forensic pathologist, I knocked on doors to tell people that loved ones were dead. I brought people down into the morgue to identify bodies. I've sat with families in very horrible circumstances. And the number one question I've always been asked is, did they suffer? And as a physician, you always say, no, of course not. This was sudden, and we try to comfort them. But I always felt like a liar because I don't know, right? Now I know. And I wish I could talk to those people again and say, look, this is beautiful. I mean, even under these horrible circumstances, the horrible circumstance is a second. The process after that is incredible. There's nothing to worry. I say that no amount of worry will transform your future. No amount of grief is going to transform or fix your past. And you just have to be where you are right now and love that. And I think that is kind of where I am with it now.